Aloha, this video is in response to Burke's definition of a man, or a person, as you mentioned in your little video to help explain. Burke came up with this definition of man in general, and then broke the article down into each of the different phrases that he used in his definition, and goes a little bit more in depth to help us understand the importance of symbols in human life and in human interaction. And he starts off by talking about how man is a symbol-using animal, and how everything around us is a symbol in order to help us understand this concept of reality that we have, and how much we really depend upon symbols without even really realizing it. That we each have this need to communicate and to express ourselves, and we do so using words or symbols. Much like a writer or a poet will use the words to express himself, or even a dancer or a musician who might grasp this concept of symbols a little bit better than in other fields of study. He also talked about how these words and these symbols are labels to help us grasp a certain understanding. And this word label kind of made me think of our need to organize and to put things into categories in order to place them into certain areas of relativity, I guess, in order to understand these things. He also talked a lot about Freud and his interpretation of dreams, and how these words that he uses, such as displacement and condensation, in understanding symbols of dreams, can also be applied to real life, because everything around us is a symbol of something else. And so there is displacement in our real lives around us, and not just in our dreams. He also, the second part of this definition was that we invent the negative. That within nature, things simply are, and there's not really there's not really a negative or an opposite. It simply is what it is. No one ever tells a bird no, not to do that, and that kind of made me think back to the organization again. In order to put each thing in its own little category with these labels on them, we'll have to say, no, it doesn't belong in this category, it belongs in this category. And comes back to this need that we have to organize and to communicate our ideas and our understanding. And these ideas that we're trying to express need symbols. So kind of going back to that again. But with this negative, there's kind of a choice. There's a positive and a negative. There's a yes and a no. There's all these different opposites that come that create this choice. Kind of made me think of the Garden of Eden a little bit through that section. It was kind of a fun section to read, on that section on choice and opposites. He also talked about how man is separated from his natural condition by his own tools, the things that he creates, because tools and language. He talked about a little bit how language is kind of a tool that we use in order to help us get what we need. We depend upon it to survive, to develop, and to, once again, to express ourselves and to communicate, which kind of seems to be a reoccurring thing, this need to communicate and to organize. He also talked a little bit in this section of tools and language. It made me think of which came first, the chicken or the egg. And then thinking about that a little bit more, it was kind of neat to see that maybe they have to coexist, that maybe they just grow together instead of create one another, but that they can grow exponentially in order to create something. They create something within that growth. The next section that Burke talked about was goaded by a spirit of hierarchy, which was a little bit harder to understand for me personally, but still rather interesting. How each of the different classes are mysteries to one another, and so there's this need to define them, once again, to put labels on them and to organize them, and yet at the same time how they're connecting. For example, with the term Lord, it can refer to God, but it can also refer to this level of hierarchy, making some kind of symbolism and connection between there, and not really knowing which one they're really talking about. And the last section he talked about was how man was rotten with perfection, which was kind of a fun section to read as well, because we talked about how we're each searching for this perfection, we're striving for something more, and how these symbols and these labels kind of have helped us to reach that idea. We're trying to find the perfect symbol in order to express ourselves, and so we've got this idea of perfection in our minds, and we're trying to attain that in other areas of our lives as well. And in my mind, it kind of stemmed from this language and trying to find the perfect symbol in order to express what we're trying to say. So overall, it was a very interesting article to read. It prompted some really neat thoughts, especially relating to the gospel in my mind, and I just enjoyed it very much.